Hello, welcome to my End of Age Timeline video series, which will cover 35 major questions dealing with end times. I will cover questions such as, relative to each other, when did the seals, trumpets, and bowls in Revelation take place? Who are the beasts, false prophet, scarlet beast, harlot, and the two witnesses? When does the Great Tribulation happen and for how long? Who are the 144,000 sealed bondservants mentioned in Revelation? What and when is God's wrath during the end of age timeline? In the future, will we ever know the day of the rapture? When does Jesus return for the rapture? What are the first and second resurrections? Who is with Jesus at his second coming, and who is in his army? After Christ returns for the harvest, where do we all go? What and when is the day of the Lord? What, where, and when is the marriage supper of the Lamb? Who are the martyrs in Revelation? What and when is the 1,000-year reign with Christ or the millennial reign? Are Christians part of the day of judgment? When does the current heaven and earth get destroyed? What will the new heaven, earth, and Jerusalem be like? And many other topics such as Armageddon, the final war, and much more. I also have articles written that cover each question that are currently available to read, but for those of you that would rather listen to someone speak and to be able to see some supporting scriptures and graphics at the same time, this video series will help you learn about end times or to hear another person's viewpoint to compare it to what you already believe or have been taught without having to read through my articles or figure out where to look on my spreadsheet to find supporting information. I've already done a video that gives an overview of my end of age timeline spreadsheet, and if you're interested in watching that, I will put a link to it in the description area along with a link to the actual end of age timeline spreadsheet itself in case you would like to have it open to pause this video, to look at something before resuming, or to study it at a separate time. The first question is, relative to each other, when do the seals, trumpets, and bowls happen? The link to this question will take you down to the answer. I think the topic of how the seals, trumpets, and bowls relate to one another for how they will unfold is a very important item to discuss before addressing the rest of the end-of-age events in an attempt to create a timeline. There are several varying viewpoints as to how they're interwoven, but there are basically three main viewpoints amongst Christians on how they're connected. The first one isn't accepted as much as the last two, and the concept is that the three areas are linear, meaning that all of the seals are broken, followed by the blowing of the 7 trumpets, and then the 7 bowls are finally poured out. This can quickly be ruled out by looking at Revelation 8 verses 1-2, which says, "When the Lamb broke the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them." There's not much more that happens in the 7th seal relative to the 6 seals before this point, and it's probably not good to assume that the few items during the 7th seal stand by themselves as the completion of the 7th and final seal. I believe we should take what it says that happens when the 7th seal is broken at face value, and that the 7 trumpets that are given to the 7 angels to sound them are the main events of the 7th seal. The second possibility has the 7 trumpets occurring during the 7th seal. Some variations put the first trumpet directly after the 7th seal, like above, but it also has the bowls of God's wrath being poured out at the same time, meaning trumpet 1 and bowl 1 happen at the same time, and continues with that pattern all the way through the 7th trumpet and the 7th bowl happening at the same time. The main problem with this interpretation is that when you take each of the trumpets and bowls and numerically match them up, and if they were to occur during the same time, there are conflicts with them that happen together. Let's look at each of the numbered pairs for 2 through 6 and see if we can see anything that would indicate that the trumpets and bowls couldn't possibly be matched up and happen at the same time. When we look at the second trumpet, it has 1/3 of the sea life die from a mountain of fire. But the second bowl has all of the sea life die because the water became blood. Well, this would not make any sense to have them happen simultaneously, and for God to have John write that 1/3 of the sea life died from the events in the second trumpet, but have the second bowl being poured out at the same time, which kills all of the sea life. It leaves things in a confusing state to be able to follow it, and it's actually mathematically impossible for both to occur at the same time. At the very least, the trumpet would have to be completed first in order for 1/3 of the sea life to die, and then the bowl could be poured out to kill the remaining 2/3 of the sea life, or technically all of the sea life at that point in time. But then we would have to say that trumpet 2 and bowl 2 are staggered by the length of the second trumpet. Then, of course, we could no longer say that the trumpets and bowls occur at the same time, and the theory for how the trumpets and bowls occur together would be disproven. I believe this right here is enough to disprove the second possibility of how the trumpets and bowls happen together, but let's continue to look at the trumpets and bowls for 3 through 6. The third trumpet has a great burning star, which fell on 1/3 of the rivers and springs, turning the water bitter, and many men died from the waters. Conversely, during the third bowl, the waters and springs were turned into blood, and that is what they had to drink, and it says they deserve it. This is not even close to turning water bitter from a burning star. This interpretation of having the trumpets and bowls happening simultaneously would have the reader thinking, so did the waters turn bitter, or were they turned into blood? They both can't be true. For the fourth trumpet, 1/3 of the sun, moon, and stars were struck, so that 1/3 of them would be darkened, and 1/3 of the day and night would not shine. The opposite of extinguishing, or darkening them, happened during the fourth bowl. Instead of the sun being darkened, it was made to scorch men with intense heat. I'm not saying that it isn't possible for 1/3 of the sun to be struck and made to not give its light for 8 hours of the day, and then still scorch men with intense heat with the remaining daylight. But I personally don't believe those are two things that would be grouped together, and that the fourth trumpet and bowl wouldn't happen at the same time. The fifth trumpet and bowl both affected the beast and his followers, but in two totally different ways. In the fifth trumpet, it was the locust with the sting of a scorpion that could only hurt those without the seal of God in their foreheads for 5 months. However, during the fifth bowl, it was poured out on the throne of the beast and his kingdom, and it was darkened, and they gnawed their tongues because of the pain, and blasphemed God because of their pains and sores. Could this happen technically at the same time? Sure. But once again, the same type of topic is being brought up for both the trumpet and bowl, this time them affecting the beast and his followers, but the two affect them in totally different, unrelated ways. It would leave the reader with the feeling of, so what's going on here? Stinging locusts, or a kingdom being darkened, and a plague of sores? Trumpet and Bowl 6 both have events that involve armies and the Euphrates River. However, the likelihood that this trumpet and bowl happen at the same time is not very probable, because the supernatural army of 200 million that kills 1/3 of mankind during the seventh trumpet would be at the same place geographically and at the same time as when the spirits from Satan, the beast, and the false prophet leave to gather the kings of the whole world for the war at Armageddon when the Euphrates River dries up. The king's armies of the world wouldn't have a chance and would be slaughtered before the war even took place for which they were being gathered. This would make the war at Armageddon not even necessary, as very few, if any, would make it there from being annihilated from the unbelievably powerful and deadly army of the 4 angels which kills 1/3 of mankind. Additionally, there is absolutely no mention of this great supernatural army of 200 million when the account of the war at Armageddon is described in Revelation 19 verses 17 to 21, which would have happened just after the next and final bowl. During the war at Armageddon, it says that after the beast and the false prophet were thrown into the lake of fire, the rest of those gathered for the war were killed by the sword from the mouth of Jesus. But if the army of 200 million were released from the Euphrates River to go kill 1/3 of mankind, then Jesus wouldn't have to kill the king's armies, as the army of the 4 angels would currently be slaughtering them, as their paths surely would have crossed being that there will have been an absolutely enormous number of people coming and going in the same region. We can see that by the account of the events that will happen during the seven trumpets and bowls, that although they may affect similar things, they are absolutely completely different points in time, as the events that happen would conflict with each other, either from a logical point of view or simply being physically or mathematically impossible. Revelation and the end of age events might be a challenging topic to easily understand everything, but like the impossibility of the events of just the second trumpet and bowl alone, God isn't going to have John write conflicting and or confusing information. So in conclusion, for the second possibility, I believe by comparing the events of the trumpets and bowls that we can safely say that they do not happen at the same time. So this brings us to the third and final mainstream possibility, and what I believe to be what John was writing to explain what will happen with the seals, trumpets, and bowls. I believe that the verse that was used to disprove the first method that we discussed already shows that the seven trumpets take place during the seventh seal. This verse is Revelation 8 verses 1 through 2, which says, "When the Lamb broke the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and seven trumpets were given to them." Then concerning the timing of the trumpets and bowls, I believe that the bowls happen during the seventh trumpet, and that can be shown by the phenomena that are described both for the seventh trumpet and the seventh bowl, meaning that when these phenomena happen during the seventh bowl, that by default they are also happening during the seventh trumpet and are the same events in time. Let's look at what is said in the seventh trumpet verse in Revelation 11, verses 15 and 19. "Then the seventh angel sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, 'The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever.' And the temple of God which is in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant appeared in his temple, and there were flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder, and an earthquake, and a great hailstorm." In Revelation, the events of lightning, thunder, and even earthquakes is not that unusual, but I believe the great hailstorm mentioned is unique, and is only mentioned in two locations. The other place is in Revelation 16, verses 17 to 18 and 21. "Then the seventh angel poured out his bowl upon the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, 'It is done.' And there were flashes of lightning, and sounds, and peals of thunder. And there was a great earthquake, such as there had not been since man came to be upon the earth. And huge hailstones, about 100 pounds each, came down from heaven upon men. And men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, because its plague was extremely severe." I believe the specificness of it being not any hail, but a great hailstorm, and that it is also accompanied by lightning, thunder, and an earthquake, that God wanted his readers to make the connection that the last of the events of the seventh bowl are the same as the end of the events in the seventh trumpet. Also, there are only two places in Revelation that mention the temple of God being opened. The first is at the end of the seventh trumpet in Revelation 11:19. "And the temple of God, which is in heaven, was opened, and the ark of his covenant appeared in his temple, and there were flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder, and an earthquake and a great hailstorm." The second place is at the start of the seven bowls, and it says in Revelation 15, verses 5 to 8, "After these things I looked, and the temple of the tabernacle of testimony in heaven was opened. And the seven angels who had the seven plagues came out of the temple, clothed in linen, clean and bright, and girded around their chests with golden sashes. Then one of the four living creatures gave to the seven angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no one was able to enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished." I would say this is pretty clear that John is writing about the same moment in time. And at the end of the seventh trumpet, the temple of God is opened, and the seven bowls of God's wrath are passed out, and then in the next chapter, they are poured out. With the temple of God being opened up at the end of the seventh trumpet, and right before the bowls are poured out, and along with disproving the possibility of the trumpets and bowls all being paired up and occurring at the same time like we just did above in the previous method, this by default means that the seven bowls happen within the time frame of the seventh trumpet. So as the seventh bowl finishes up with the great hailstorm, the seventh trumpet then is also concluding, and with the trumpets being the events of the seventh seal, then the seventh seal is also coming to an end. So I believe scriptures show that seals 1 through 6 take place, and then the trumpets are nested inside of the seventh seal, and then the seven bowls are nested inside of the seventh trumpet, and that the final seal, trumpet, and bowl all end at the same time. This is the premise that I will use for the rest of the events during the end of age study to establish a timeline.